Recently declassified US spy and weather satellite photographs taken above most areas of the world have been causing a stir amongst archaeologists. Amongst other findings, the photos reveal long-lost civilizations in the Near and Middle East, mysterious structures, holes in the ice, and evidence of early ice shelf collapse in Antarctica. Using photos from the covert Corona satellite program and other declassified satellite photos, initially designed with espionage in mind, researchers have identified thousands of ancient sites, some of which may well be structures made by previously unknown cultures or civilizations. In the 1950s, the West was able to obtain very little information about activities inside the Soviet Union due to the generally closed nature of Soviet society, which prevented the movement of foreigners around the country, and the censorship exercised over newspapers and other publications. Early in 1958, just a few months after the Soviets launched the first Sputnik into space, President Eisenhower authorized a top-priority reconnaissance satellite project managed jointly by the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and the U.S. Air Force. Its task was to launch into orbit a camera-carrying spacecraft that would take photographs of the Soviet Union and then safely return the film to Earth. This covert spy satellite was dubbed Corona by the CIA. To disguise its real purpose, the satellite program was given the cover name Discoverer and designated as a scientific research program. Corona was in effect a replacement for the U-2, America's high-flying reconnaissance spy plane, which had made flights across the Soviet Union throughout the 1950s unchallenged, as the Soviets did not possess surface-to-air missiles capable of reaching the 15 miles plus altitude of the U-2. However, by the middle of the decade, the U.S. government began to realize that the Soviets would soon develop such an anti-aircraft weapon, so began to look for an effective replacement. Although Corona was only meant to be a temporary solution to the problem of surveillance, spurred on by the success of Soviet missiles, in the end it proved to be the mainstay of the U.S. strategic surveillance program for over 10 years. But things did not begin smoothly for Corona. There were multiple failed launches throughout 1959 and 1960 due to a variety of reasons. But in August 1960, the first Corona images were returned to Earth, showing 64 previously unknown Soviet airfields. A new Corona satellite was launched on average every 6 weeks, and in the 10 years of the program, a total of 145 were launched, of which at least 120 were successful. A total of 850,000 images were taken during the years between 1960 and 1972, when Corona was in operation. The satellite's camera systems relied on special, high-definition film developed secretly by Kodak. An exposed roll of this ultra-sensitive film would have to be physically recovered from its satellite in order to be processed, which involved individual film canisters being jettisoned from orbit. As the film fell back to Earth, a minuscule parachute would open, generally somewhere over the Pacific, and the canister would then drift back down through the atmosphere. A U.S. military airplane armed with the skyhook technology would then catch the film in mid-air as it descended, bringing it back to the ground for processing. So secret was the Corona program that the first public acknowledgement of it, or any American military surveillance satellites, was not made until the 1st of October 1978 at the Kennedy Space Center, when President Jimmy Carter stated, "Photographic reconnaissance satellites have become an important stabilizing factor in world affairs in the monitoring of arms control agreements. They make an immense contribution to the security of all nations." Further information on the relevant programs and satellites was not made available for over 15 years, after this in the mid-1990s, when the American Corona program was mostly declassified. But it was only after heavy lobbying from Robert McCormack Adams, an archaeologist who was at the time secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, that the declassification order was finally realized. Recently, the spy photos taken by Corona have been used in a way which could not have been imagined by the originators of the secret program. Today, those high-resolution images represent a valuable picture of an earlier planet. According to Jason a Harvard University archaeologist who works with corona images, corona is like a time machine for us. In a lot of cases, they lead us to landscapes that are gone, that don't exist anymore. Archaeologists are particularly interested in what corona images reveal about areas of the Near and Middle East which have undergone swift development over the past 2 or 3 decades, destroying a vast number of archaeological settlements, ancient roads, and irrigation systems. The corona spy photos have been especially useful in identifying ancient Assyrian sites, today located in modern northern Iraq, southeastern Turkey, northwestern Iran, and northeastern Syria. According to Jason it has been possible to map the colossal irrigation systems constructed by the kings of Assyria to support their new capitals of Nimrud and Nineveh. In fact, using the spy photos, has been able to identify and map over 60 kilometers of canals across a wide part of Assyria, many of which have never been recognized on the ground before. At the University of Arkansas, researchers at the Center for Advanced Spatial Technologies have compiled a publicly available image database of 2,214 corona photographs that identify 803 archaeological sites. Dartmouth College anthropology professor Jesse Cassana spent years scanning the declassified files for evidence of past civilizations in the Middle East. He said, "The images are invaluable, because 50 years ago, when the photos were taken, the countryside was far less industrialized. Ancient details remain visible if you know what to look for. We were able to document 10,000 previously unknown archaeological sites that through the history of 150 years of archaeological work in the Middle East, no one has ever documented." The corona spy photos are not the only 1960s satellite photos being utilized for modern research. Recently, Earth scientists David Gallagher and Garrett Campbell uncovered 25 boxes of magnetic tapes and photographic film from the 3 Nimbus weather satellites launched in the 1960s from the National Climatic Data Center archive in North Carolina. The 1964 Nimbus satellite images of the southern coast of Norway and the Pyrenees are thought to be the first images of Europe taken from space. A few satellite photos taken over Antarctica in 1964 appear to show the remains of structures under the ice, though no one is sure what civilization these buildings belong to. They may be abandoned 20th century structures, or they could be much earlier. Some have suggested hundreds or even thousands of years earlier. Only access to more digitalized satellite photos of the Antarctic, which are not yet available, will help in identifying what these strange shapes under the ice may be. It's possible that the CIA's Corona satellite took earlier pictures of Europe, the Soviet Union, and the Antarctic, but those images have not as yet been made public. Indeed, to date, only about 5% of the images from the Corona program have been scanned, and each photograph costs $30 to digitize, so it may be some time before everything is available to study. The Nimbus satellite photos also give scientists their earliest look at Antarctica before global warming, and in the 1964 photos of the continent, they reveal a greater extent of sea ice than at any time since. But Gallagher and Campbell were extremely surprised when they came upon images which appeared to show a mysterious hole in the ice. Although holes in the Arctic ice are a common phenomenon today as the Arctic warms, but in the colder 1960s, a large patch of thin or melted ice was unexpected, and nothing like it was seen again until the 21st century. Since the images of the hole were made public, there have been various interpretations as to what it represents. Some researchers believe that there is something ancient lurking beneath the ice which caused the huge hole to form. Others that it represents the entrance to a secret tunnel to another location. The two scientists believe that as Antarctica in its past had a different climate, around 15 million years ago, there was the possibility that running water existed on the surface. The team think that water got trapped as lakes, perhaps 2 or 3 miles below the ice sheet, in what they have called ghost lakes. Professor Frank Mulakaga of the University of South Florida explained, We call them ghost lakes because they're invisible to us until something happens and they reveal themselves. So the scientific hypothesis is that the hole was created due to these lakes, which are believed to be spread under huge areas of Antarctica. Unsurprisingly, some researchers do not agree and think there is much more going on in Antarctica than has ever publicly been admitted. Melting snow in Antarctica, due to global climate change, may have revealed signs of ancient human settlements on the icy continent. Some researchers believe that the disappearing snow is finally exposing the mysterious truth about the South Pole, and that ancient sailors may well have reached the continent hundreds, if not thousands of years before 19th century explorers. Their ancient settlements may be revealed in satellite images from NASA, which appear to show strange markings beneath the snow, some of which look like ancient structures, including a mysterious pyramidal building. But how old are these enigmatic remains, and who built them? It was recently announced by scientists that a group of glaciers, which span an eighth of the East Antarctica coastline, are being melted by the warming seas. This area of the Antarctic stores a huge amount of ice, and if this were lost, would in the long term significantly raise global sea levels and drown coastal settlements around the world. According to Alex Gardner, a glaciologist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, the change doesn't seem random. It looks systematic. That hints at underlying ocean influences that have been incredibly strong in West Antarctica. Now we might be finding clear links of the ocean starting to influence East Antarctica. Heightened attention needs to be given to these glaciers. We need to better map the topography. Only then can we be more conclusive in determining whether these glaciers will enter a phase of rapid retreat or stabilize. In November 2019, NASA's Operation Icebridge, a survey of ice conditions in the Arctic, Antarctic and Alaska, completed its 11-year operational program. According to NASA's website, Icebridge is the largest airborne survey of Earth's polar ice ever flown. It yields an unprecedented three-dimensional view of the Arctic and Antarctic ice sheets, ice shelves, and sea ice. These flights provide a yearly multi-instrument look at the behavior of the rapidly changing features of the Greenland and Antarctic ice. Over its time of operation, Icebridge completed more than 900 flights between Greenland and Antarctica, along with more than 150 in Alaska, where a final mission was flown in 2020. The images and information obtained from this NASA project represent the only data set of its kind for scientists to study. Project manager Eugenia DeMarco stated, "Our data is freely available to anyone. I believe Icebridge and the data it has collected helps answer the question of what's going on with the physical world, and that is one of the biggest contributions Icebridge has provided over the years." It is a little surprising that more researchers are not studying this treasure trove of images of the icy continent, although one or two obviously have. It was recently announced on some news outlets that one NASA satellite image of the melting ice in Antarctica had revealed something mysterious lurking below the ice. Although there is some controversy over the genuineness of the images used, some researchers have identified signs of an ancient settlement, apparently about 1.4 miles beneath the ice on this photo. Some have noticed wall-like lines, blocks which look like man-made buildings, and a mysterious pyramid-like structure in the image. In another satellite image, this time from Google Earth, what appears to be the top of a large building measuring around 400 feet in width has been identified. The oval-shaped structure has been likened to the Motte and Bailey castles of the medieval period in Western Europe. The symmetrical layout of what appear to be walls has left many convinced that the structure could be an ancient man-made fort. What could these structures represent? Was there an ancient culture present in Antarctica that has remained undetected until now? Needless to say, the presence of ancient man-made structures in Antarctica would be a complete shock to the scientific community. Antarctica is the highest, driest, coldest and windiest continent on Earth, and unlike the Arctic regions, it's believed to have had no indigenous population of humans when modern man arrived there. But perhaps during short periods of time in the remote past, there was less ice on the continent, which gave people the opportunity to settle there. Or maybe people somehow adapted to the icy environment and carved out a civilization on Antarctica. It is a fact, however, that there were periods in Earth's remote history when Antarctica was not covered by ice and would have been habitable. So it's not so outlandish to imagine previous settlement on the continent at some time in its ancient past. However, according to scientists, Antarctica was last free of ice at least 3 million years ago, long before hominids capable of settling in the continent arose. Another problem with ancient life on Antarctica is that humans did not develop the technology for reliable oceanic travel until around 2,000 years ago, at the earliest, so prehistoric settlements there would be unlikely. It's possible, though, that what appear to be settlement structures on satellite photos are a bit more recent. Perhaps they could still be ancient, but date to within the last 1,500 years or so. It's certainly possible that Antarctica could have been reached by sailors in prehistory, and perhaps they set up seasonal settlements or camps there. Maybe the remains of these camps are what we're seeing in the ice in modern satellite photos. But prehistoric sailors making a practical permanent settlement in Antarctica is perhaps unlikely due to the forbidding climate. The late Gavin Menzies, a British author and retired submarine lieutenant commander, wrote a number of controversial books promoting his claim that the Chinese sailed to America before Columbus. In a summary of his 2002 book, 1421, The Year China Discovered the World, he put forward his controversial theory, which included the discovery of Antarctica. On the 8th of February 1421, the largest fleet the world had ever seen sailed from its base in China, he said. The ship's 500-feet-long junks made from the finest teak and mahogany were led by Emperor Zhou-Dai's loyal eunuch admirals. Their mission was to proceed all the way to the end of the earth to collect tribute from the barbarians beyond the seas, and unite the whole world in Confucian harmony. Their journey would last over 2 years and circle the entire globe. When they returned, Zhu Dai had fallen from power and China was beginning its long self-imposed isolation from the world it had so recently embraced. The great ships rotted at their moorings and the records of their journeys were destroyed. Lost was the knowledge that Chinese ships had reached America 70 years before Columbus and circumnavigated the globe a century before Magellan. They had also discovered Antarctica, reached Australia 350 years before Cook, and solved the problem of longitude 300 years before the Europeans. Menzies' ideas about Chinese discoveries are not considered feasible by academics, but what about the ancient Polynesians? There are interesting stories about the Uti Rangiora, a 7th century AD Polynesian navigator from the island of Rarotonga, the largest of the Cook Islands, a nation of 15 islands in the central South Pacific. According to ancient Maori legends, around the year 650, Uite Rangiora led a fleet of large ocean-going canoes south until they reached a place of bitter cold where rock-like structures rose from a solid sea. He returned with stories of icebergs, naming the land Ti Tai Uka Apia, meaning sea foaming like arrowroot, comparing the similar characteristics of arrowroot powder with these sheets of floating ice and snow. This voyage is said to have happened before the Maori people settled in New Zealand. There's little doubt that the ancient Polynesian explorers encountered icebergs on their voyage, though whether they ventured far enough south to actually see an ice shelf is uncertain. But the possibility has to be entertained that this intrepid group of Polynesian explorers, or indeed some other wandering sailors, may well have landed on Antarctica hundreds of years before Europeans arrived there. Perhaps these ancient sailors constructed temporary settlements that are yet to be discovered by archaeologists in the frozen continent. On February the 6th, 2020, weather stations recorded the highest temperature on record for Antarctica. Thermometers located at the Esperanza Base on the northern edge of the Antarctic Peninsula reached an incredible 18.3 degrees Celsius, 64.9 degrees Fahrenheit, almost the same temperature as Los Angeles that day. Unsurprisingly, this warm weather caused extensive melting on nearby glaciers. But this was not a freak weather day, far from it. The 12-month period between October 2019 and September 20, known by scientists as the Arctic meteorological year, was the second warmest on record, next to that of October 2015 to September 2016. However, there may be something positive to come out of this worrying news. When satellite images of this melting are made public, perhaps they will reveal further evidence of settlements on the continent, which otherwise would never have come to light. Antarctica has been a continent shrouded in mystery for many years. As it stands, we still don't know too much about this icy landmass, and its past is as equally confusing as its present. Over the years, we've heard many rumors and theories about what could have happened on the continent many years ago. We've heard everything from stories of a lost civilization to theories of a secret Nazi bunker from World War II. Today, we'll be taking a look at some of these wild theories and learning if there's any truth behind them. Let us know about one of the craziest conspiracy theories you've ever heard in the comments. Who knows, maybe one of those theories will make it into a future video. In 1947, Admiral Richard E. Byrd led an expedition of military troops from the US, Britain and Australia to Antarctica, titled the United States Navy Antarctic Development Program. The official story is that this was a straightforward mission to establish a research base on the remote continent. But is this the true story? Many UFO researchers aren't convinced. This expedition, or perhaps invasion, has come to be known by another name, Operation Highjump. Shortly after World War II, rumors began swirling that Hitler survived the war and had fled to Antarctica with a number of supporters. It's widely known that Hitler was deeply interested in the occult, and some even claim that his interest led him to making some otherworldly connections. It has been posited that the Nazis found an entrance into the inner Earth in Antarctica, and that they made some kind of alliance with a race of technologically advanced inner Earth beings. Operation Highjump comprised of 4,700 military personnel, 6 helicopters, 6 Martin PBM flying boats, 2 seaplanes, 15 assorted aircraft, 13 Navy supply ships, and 1 aircraft carrier. It seems like a lot of resources to simply establish a research base. After all of this preparation, the mission was surprisingly cut short. The official explanation was that the troops had to leave because winter was coming, but others claim the truth is that the German secret space program's technology was far too advanced and the US forces were defeated. As more and more information becomes unclassified, it's possible we may someday know the true story. Antarctica has always been a place that few humans have ever seen. Only scientists, support personnel, and the extremely wealthy and elite have the resources to travel there. But in recent years, everyday people have been using available technology to make some pretty shocking observations on the desolate continent. As anonymous, self-proclaimed Earth Watchman discovered an enormous cave-like opening off an island off the coast of Antarctica using Google Earth. The opening looks much too precise to be something created by nature alone. The investigator who spotted the opening claims to have measured the anomaly using Google Earth tools and that the entrance is over 150 feet wide. What's even stranger is that this so-called cave was only visible on Google Earth for 6 months. Then it mysteriously vanished. What covered it up? Was it natural causes, an avalanche, or was it digitally removed because the public stumbled upon something they were never meant to see? It has long been our understanding that Antarctica is the only continent on Earth that has never had a native human population. However, scientific study has discovered that millions of years ago, Antarctica was perhaps a semi-tropical climate. Fossil evidence has revealed that about 55 million years ago, Antarctica was covered in dense forest and even supported the growth of palm trees along its coast. But according to what is known of human history, it seems impossible that prehistoric humans ever inhabited Antarctica. But some topographical photos that NASA have made led some people to challenge this long-held belief. The photos taken in 2016 show the ruins of what appears to be an ancient city. Leading archaeologist Ashoka Tripathi of the Department of Archaeology at the University of Calcutta believes the images show clear evidence of an ancient human settlement beneath the ice sheet. Tripathi has been quoted saying, "These are clearly features of some sort of human-made structure, resembling some sort of pyramidal structure. The pattern clearly shows nothing we should expect from natural geomorphological formations found in nature. We clearly have here evidence of human engineering. The only problem is that these photographs were taken in Antarctica under 2 kilometers of ice. That is clearly the puzzling part. We do not have any explanation for this at the moment." Recently, images of pyramid-like structures found in Antarctica went viral. Some scientists say these are simply mountains and that a freeze-thaw cycle of erosion has given them their distinctive pyramidal shape. Others disagree. When comparing the structure of these possible pyramids to other mountains that have eroded from a freeze-thaw cycle, such as the Swiss Alps and Ellsworth, there are virtually no similarities. The angles of the Antarctic pyramids are strangely precise to have been formed by nature alone. There remains no scientific consensus on the true origins of these structures, but if they were in fact made by intelligent hands, they might be the oldest pyramids on our planet. So the question remains, who put them there? A possible former US Navy whistleblower claimed to have some insight. In January of 2015, UFO researcher Linda Moulton Howe received a letter from an alleged retired US Navy engineer, former first-class flight non-commissioned officer. The whistleblower, who refers to himself as Brian, claims that he served in the Navy with a squadron called Antarctic Development Squadron 6. He worked with this squadron since 1983 and then retired in March 1997. Being a flight engineer, he was able to fly for more than 4,000 hours and saw things that most people can't even imagine. Brian's home base was the McMurdo Station, which is a 3.5-hour flight from the South Pole Station. The crew would often have flights back and forth between the 2 stations. On several flights to and from the McMurdo South Pole base, the crew saw flying saucers that darted around the tops of the Antarctic Trans-Mountain Range, almost exactly at the same point every time they flew between this area. Brian also claims that during his service, his squadron was never allowed to fly over a certain area, which was 5 miles from the McMurdo Station. However, once, due to a medical evacuation, his crew did fly over the forbidden area, and what they saw was a large hole in the ice, as if there was an entrance to a huge base. After this mission, the crew was debriefed by intelligence agents from Washington, D.C., and told explicitly not to talk about this area. On one other occasion, his crew once again approached the restricted area, but subsequently had some electrical faults on the aircraft and experienced some mysterious anomalies. They were told to leave the area immediately and report to their squadron commander. After this incident, the pilot commander of the squadron was sent away, exempted from the mission assignment, as well as the crew. Another even more bizarre incident whistleblower Brian revealed was that, at one point, a group of scientists and their equipment were doing research in an area not far from the main base. The group always stayed in communication with command, and after 2 weeks, Brian's crew flew out to the field to see if the scientists were in need of supplies and to check their general status. But strangely, the scientists had completely disappeared, and there was no sign of their presence. The radio was on, and Brian tried to call McMurdo Station to verify that it was working properly. The plane crew was then ordered to return to McMurdo by their commander. A week later, a scientist contacted McMurdo and requested the crew return to the camp again to pick them up. As soon as the team of scientists was loaded, everyone was silent. They didn't speak to the crew of the plane and seemed frightened. As soon as the plane landed in McMurdo, the scientists were put on another plane and sent to New Zealand. The crew that remained in Antarctica never heard of them again. They completely disappeared. Their equipment was brought back from the field and then quarantined and sent back to the United States. Brian claims that very often there would be discussions between the flight crews of different bases, and some crew members had heard from some scientists that in the restricted area were some EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities, that work and interact with scientists. According to them, Antarctica is the site of a huge secret underground base where humans and what we call aliens work together. Could our understanding of ancient history be completely wrong? Is it possible that we're not alone, not only in the universe, but even on our own planet? If the ice in Antarctica continues melting at its current rate, who knows what may be revealed in the years to come? A NASA project called the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna made news recently with what appears to be the discovery of a parallel universe above Antarctica, a universe where time is running backwards. There have also been stories of mysterious structures being found deep beneath the ice in the continent. So, just what is going on in Antarctica? Antarctica is the world's southernmost continent. It is also the world's highest, driest, windiest, coldest, and iciest continent. Antarctica is about 5.5 million square miles in size, and thick ice covers about 98% of the land. The continent is divided into East Antarctica, which is mainly a high ice-covered plateau, and West Antarctica, largely composed of an ice sheet covering an archipelago of mountainous islands. Knowledge about Antarctica has increased greatly in recent decades, with geologists, geophysicists, glaciologists, biologists, and other scientists having mapped and visited all of the continent's mountain regions. But there are still great mysteries to be discovered there. In May 2020, Antarctica hit the news in a sensational new way, when an article appeared claiming NASA had uncovered evidence for a parallel universe there. This data came from the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, ANITA, a NASA-funded experiment that has floated around the South Pole 4 times since 2006. It mainly looks for evidence of elusive particles called neutrinos crashing into the ice below and triggering a spray of particles that emits telltale radio waves. ANITA has not yet traced any such signals. However, the instrument has found radio signals produced by other types of particles from space known as cosmic rays as they crash into Earth. According to the report, low-energy subatomic neutrinos with a mass close to zero can pass completely through the Earth, but higher-energy objects are stopped by the solid matter of our planet. That means that the high-energy particles can only be detected coming down from space. But the team's ANITA detected heavier particles, so-called tower neutrinos, which come up from the Earth. This bizarre finding would suggest that these particles are actually traveling backwards in time, suggesting evidence of a parallel universe. Explaining this signal requires the existence of an upside-down universe created in the same Big Bang as our own, and existing in parallel with it. In this mirror world, positive is negative, left is right, and time runs backwards. According to the Daily Star, there is a parallel universe right next to ours where all the rules of physics seem to be operating in reverse. Can this be real? Do we have evidence for a parallel universe existing in Antarctica? Unfortunately, it looks like some news agencies may have misinterpreted the evidence somewhat. The numerous parallel universe articles now online seem to originate to a story published by the New Scientist with the alarming headline, "We may have spotted a parallel universe going backwards in time." The article contains a discussion of the puzzling results from the ANITA experiment. Essentially, it was misinterpreted by a few publications that, it seems, just read the headline. The real story is about neutrinos. Particle physicist Peter Gorham, who is the principal investigator of ANITA, told Science Alert, "We have encountered a small number of anomalies in our data, and once we have exhausted all of the possible explanations within the standard model of physics, only then is it time to consider other ideas that push these boundaries. We are really not done here yet, certainly not at the point where parallel universes are necessary." Leading member of the ANITA experiment team, Ibrahim Safa, said, "We looked at these ANITA events, and they can't be standard neutrinos. They were probably a result of our imperfect understanding of the Antarctic ice, but there's a chance some new physics phenomenon is responsible." In December 2017, it was reported that researchers had found a previously unknown huge canyon deep beneath the ice-covered continent. Using radar technology, scientists were able to look 5 kilometers beneath the snow and ice to discover this deep canyon. The feature, which was found near the Denman Glacier on the west of Antarctica, extends for more than 3,500 meters below sea level, almost as deep as the average depth of the ocean. This is also 8 times deeper than the shores of the Dead Sea, which is the lowest exposed landmass on Earth. Previous attempts to map the structure of the Denman Glacier have been unsuccessful, as the deep ice flow beneath the surface skewed results, representing it as much shallower than scientists now know it is. But the latest effort to create the map, known as the BED machine, combined ice flow information with seismic activity to create the detailed map. Matthew Morlingham, who studies ice sheet modelling at the University of California, told the BBC News, "There have been many attempts to sound the bed of Denman, but every time they flew over the canyon, they couldn't see it in the radar data. The trough is so entrenched that you get side echoes from the walls of the valley, and they make it impossible to detect the reflection from the actual bed of the glacier. Ultimately, Bed Machine Antarctica presents a mixed picture. Ice streams in some areas are relatively well protected by their underlying ground features, while others on retrograde beds are shown to be more at risk from potential marine ice sheet instability." In January 2020, Antarctica again hit the news when an image taken from Google Earth was published online. This sensational image seemed to suggest that there might actually be a huge, tall building standing on the ice in Antarctica. A video was uploaded to a YouTube channel, Mr. MBB33, and the paranormal researchers who own the channel suggest that the structure is as much as 2,000 feet in height and the width spans 6 football fields. The video on YouTube has received over 80,000 views so far, and viewers are clearly fascinated by what they think they can see in the image. Strange that all countries want to take over land, but no country claims Antarctica. I think there is something that they know that we don't, one commenter said. Another user suggested that something along the lines of the Project Iceworm was active in Antarctica. Project Iceworm was a top-secret United States Army program of the Cold War, which aimed to build a network of mobile nuclear missile launch sites under the Greenland ice sheet. Many people, however, believe this controversial image shows nothing more than a huge, oddly shaped block of ice. One ongoing mystery of Antarctica is the vast hole in the continent, which first appeared in the 1970s. Many paranormal researchers believe that this hole leads to a lost world beneath Antarctica, perhaps populated by strange creatures, or even that the hole leads to an underground alien base. In the early 1970s, when satellites first began taking photos of Earth, scientists noticed a mysterious hole in one of Antarctica's seasonal ice packs floating on the Lazarus Sea. But strangely, when the summer arrived, the gap disappeared. Was someone or something able to somehow close this massive hole? Was some unheard-of extraterrestrial technology involved? For decades, this strange event went unexplained. But in 2017, during the continent's coldest winter months, when ice should have been at its thickest, a giant 9,500 square kilometer hole suddenly appeared in the same ice pack. 2 months later, it had grown a stunning 740% larger, before once again retreating with the summer ice. It's taken a long time, but scientists now think they finally understand why this keeps happening. Using satellite observations and reanalysis data, researchers from New York University, Abu Dhabi, have found that these transient holes, known as Polynyas, seem to be scars from cyclonic storms. In September of 2017, as warm air and cold air collided at the South Pole, the swirling inward winds of a cyclone, reaching 117 kilometers an hour and whipping up waves 16 meters high, pushed the Antarctic ice back in all directions and away from the eye of the storm, like a drill into the water. These gaps are powerful influences of the atmosphere and a potential indicator of climate change. Atmospheric scientist Diana Francis stated, "Once opened, it works like a window through the sea ice, transferring huge amounts of energy during winter between the ocean and the atmosphere. Because of their large size, mid-sea Polynyas are capable of impacting the climate regionally and globally as they modify the oceanic circulation." In 2017, an image of part of Antarctica directly south of Australia appeared online. This showed what some paranormal researchers believe to be a Motte and Bailey castle, a design of castle peculiar to the 10th–13th century Europe. The motte is a type of artificial mound topped with a wooden or stone structure known as a keep. The bailey is a fortified enclosure next to the motte. What was a medieval castle doing in Antarctica? Was it part of a parallel dimension? Could it have been transported there by aliens? The Antarctic structure was about 120 meters across, which made it somewhat large for a medieval castle, but anyway, it did possess 2 circles, the Motte and Bailey perhaps. One problem with the castle theory was that the whole structure appeared to be completely flat without the significant earthworks, which in part define a Motte and Bailey castle. The mounds of such castles are particularly enduring across the centuries, but as researchers looked into the image, they noticed that the dark blue patches inside the rings were water above ice. The structure is most likely a pond or shallow lake that has frozen over during the winter and in spring, when the image was captured, had drained to some extent. This probably followed the melting or washing away of a naturally formed dam or plug. Some patterns and movements of ice and water are commonly seen wherever there is standing water with seasonal freezing. This explanation is a lot more likely than the presence of a 1,000-year-old castle belonging to a far distant culture. Despite the fact that some of Antarctica's secrets have been revealed, there is no doubt that in the future this enigmatic continent will offer up many more fascinating mysteries to the world. Newly released data from a European satellite has revealed the tectonic underworld below the frozen southernmost continent. Researchers have created incredible 3D maps of Antarctica's tectonic underworld and found that the ice has been concealing the remains of an ancient supercontinent's spectacular destruction. It's well known to scientists that the exact geological makeup of Antarctica's innermost land, located in East Antarctica, is yet to be discovered. What else awaits discovery in this mysterious continent? Antarctica today is divided into 3 distinct regions: East Antarctica, West Antarctica, and the Antarctic Peninsula, with each area containing a different topography beneath. The ice of the Antarctic Peninsula, for example, conceals a spine of mountains projecting northwest from the inside of the continent. East Antarctica, the largest area, includes flat plains as well as mountains. The Gamburtsev mountain range is located here. Its mountains extend for 750 miles, with peaks rising above 11,200 feet, roughly the same height as the European Alps. This range is completely covered by over 2,000 feet of ice. The ground in West Antarctica is almost completely below sea level. The ocean bowl beneath this section was created during the last ice age, when the weight of the ice, which was considerably thicker at the time, pushed down on the bedrock. But what else lies beneath the ice on this enigmatic continent? In November 2018, news outlets around the world reported that incredible data about Antarctica had been obtained from a defunct European satellite. Launched on March 17, 2009, the Gravity Field and Steady-State Ocean Circulation Explorer, the GOCE, was the first satellite of the Living Planet program, which is the European Space Agency's Earth Science program. It orbited Earth between March 2009 and November 2013, and its task was to measure the pull of the Earth's gravity more precisely than any mission before. Using data from that satellite, the researchers from Kiel University in Germany and the British Antarctic Survey examined Antarctica under the ice. Analysis revealed rocky zones known as cratons in the Earth's lithosphere, a zone between the planet's crust and mantle. Cratons are the core regions of most tectonic plates. The team also found orogons, which are folded-up regions of plates that are the precursors to mountain ranges. It's by studying the number of cratons and orogons that scientists are able to compare the continental plates beneath Antarctica with other regions around the world. GOCE's newly discovered cratons are believed by scientists to represent the remains of ancient continents, and they reveal important information about how Earth's modern-day continents are structured, especially Antarctica. But data from the decommissioned satellite not only produced a global gravity map, but also revealed local gravity changes with a resolution as small as around 50 miles. Co-author of the study, Fausto Ferracicoli, science leader of geology and geophysics at the British Antarctic Survey, said, "These gravity images are revolutionizing our ability to study the least understood continent on Earth, Antarctica. In East Antarctica, we see an exciting mosaic of geological features that reveal fundamental similarities and differences between the crust beneath Antarctica and other continents it was joined to until 160 million years ago." One interesting piece of information the team found was that East Antarctica is made up of old cratons and younger orogons. The researchers found similar structures to this in Australia and India. However, West Antarctica has a thinner and more homogeneous crust, which more closely resembles the southern tip of South America. The gravity map the team assembled from the data reveals that East Antarctica is made up of multiple cratons, which are the cores of long-lost continents. The scientists used data from other satellites to essentially strip Antarctica of its vast layers of ice so that they were able to focus on the bedrock beneath. When they examined this layer, the team found evidence of the continent's history as part of Gondwana, a supercontinent made of the modern southern hemisphere continents. The matching shapes of the coastlines of Western Africa and Eastern South America were first officially noted by Francis Bacon in 1620, at a time when Africa and the New World first became available to study. But the idea that not all the continents of the Southern Hemisphere were once joined in one great supercontinent was not put forward in detail until hundreds of years later. In 1912, by German meteorologist and pioneer of polar research Alfred Wegener. He's remembered today as the originator of continental drift theory, which he put forward in 1912, suggesting that the continents are slowly drifting around the Earth. But Wegener also convinced that all of the Earth's continents were once part of a single great landmass, which he called Polynya. Its name is derived from the Greek Pangaea, meaning all the Earth. Wegener proposed that Polynya existed about 240 million years ago, but by about 200 million years ago it began breaking up. Over millions of years, Polynya eventually separated into pieces that gradually moved away from one another. These pieces slowly formed the continents we recognize today. Nowadays, scientists believe that several supercontinents like Polynya have formed and broken up over the course of the Earth's history. These include Pannotia, which formed about 600 million years ago, and Rodinia, a supercontinent that assembled around 1 billion years ago and broke up 750 to 633 million years ago. In terms of Wegener's Polynya, Gondwana comprised the southern half of this supercontinent. According to plate tectonic evidence, The supercontinent of Gondwana was assembled by continental collisions in the late Precambrian, about 1 billion to 542 million years ago, and broke up around 180 million years ago. It eventually split into the landmass we know as Africa, South America, Australia, Antarctica, the Indian subcontinent, Madagascar, and the Arabian Peninsula. Even though the continent existed many millions of years ago, some paranormal researchers have put forward the idea that Gondwana may have been the original model for the lost continent of Atlantis, with the knowledge of existence somehow being passed down through the ages. Gondwana's formed into its final shape about 500 million years ago. By this time, primitive multicellular organisms had evolved, as revealed by the rare fossils left from this period, which include segmented worms, frond-like organisms, and round creatures similar to modern jellyfish. When Gondwana represented Earth's southerly supercontinent, the planet was a lot warmer than today, and crucially, there was no Antarctic ice sheet. It was also a time, the Jurassic period, when dinosaurs still roamed the Earth, and huge areas of Gondwana were covered with lush rainforest. The first stage of the breakup of the subcontinent began in the early Jurassic period, about 180 million years ago. This new information contained in this gravity map gives scientists more knowledge about how the Antarctic continent was formed. But perhaps just as importantly, it tells scientists what will happen to it in the future. Antarctica is melting at a fairly rapid rate, and being aware of its underlying structure can tell us how this will happen and perhaps how it will eventually recover. In December 2019, it was revealed that a new map of the mountains, valleys, and canyons concealed beneath Antarctica's ice had revealed the deepest land on Earth, and would help predict future ice loss. The new NASA map, called Bed Machine Antarctica, collects together ice movement measurements, seismic measurements, radar, and other data points to assemble what is hoped to be the most detailed picture ever of Antarctica's hidden features. According to NASA's website, Bed Machine is a new Antarctic bed topography product based on ice thickness data from 19 different research institutes dating back to 1967, encompassing nearly 1 million line miles of radar soundings. Bed Machine relies on the fundamental physics-based method of mass conservation to estimate what lies beneath the radar sounding lines, utilizing highly detailed information on ice flow motion from satellite data that dictates how ice moves. Originally, NASA's bed map was the result of work led by the British Antarctic Survey, where researchers assembled decades' worth of geophysical measurements. In operation from 2013, BedMap 2, like the original BedMap, was a collection of 3 data sets: surface elevation, ice thickness, and bedrock topography. One important discovery made by Bed Machine Antarctica was of previously unknown topographical features, such as the broad ridges that shield the glaciers flowing across the Transantarctic Mountains, which separate East and West Antarctica. Bed Machine also discovered the world's deepest land canyon below Denman Glacier in East Antarctica, an astonishing 11,000 feet below sea level. As a comparison, the lowest exposed region of land on the Earth is the Dead Sea, which sits a mere 1,419 feet below sea level. The new NASA map is a vital resource that will help scientists predict exactly which areas of Antarctica are at highest risk of sliding into the ocean in the next few decades or even centuries, and which parts might in fact be more stable than previously thought. Who knows what else such Antarctica mapping projects might turn up in the future.
The scientific discovery of fossilized trees dating back more than 260 million years has shocked the scientific community. Together with other recently discovered fossilized plant and tree discoveries on Antarctica, these finds suggest something that should not be, that the world's coldest, driest continent was once green and forested. Amongst other things, scientists have had to come up with an explanation of how trees were able to survive within a few degrees of latitude of the South Pole itself, where it's dark for 6 months of the year. But what does all this mean for scientific theories about Antarctica? Will they have to be changed? an ancient forested Antarctica. Over 100 years ago, Royal Naval officer and explorer Robert Falcon Scott's ill-fated expedition to Antarctica discovered fossils of plants on the Beardmore Glacier less than 310 miles from the South Pole. The expedition's chief scientist, Edward Wilson, recorded these remarkable findings in his diary, writing that most of the bigger leaves were like beech leaves in shape and venation. At the time, these discoveries were dismissed by scientists as mistaken or exaggerated, their significance almost completely ignored for over 100 years. However, over the last decade or so, a few scientists have begun to suspect that Edward Wilson may have been onto something. Even so, when proof was finally discovered, they were as shocked as anyone. The fact is that Antarctica has not always been a forbidden land of ice. Millions of years ago, when the continent was still part of the huge southern hemisphere landmass called Gondwana, forests grew near the South Pole. From around 400 million to 14 million years ago, the southern continent was a very different and much greener place than Antarctica is today, with a much warmer climate. The warmth came from the size of the landmass itself, with Gondwana land keeping away the cold currents that encircle Antarctica today. Professor Jane Francis of the University of Leeds in the UK has spent 10 field seasons in Antarctica collecting fossil plants and received the Polar Medal from the Queen in 2002. She is still in awe at the thought of a green Antarctica. I still find the idea that Antarctica was once forested absolutely mind-boggling. We take it for granted that Antarctica has always been a frozen wilderness, but the ice caps only appeared relatively recently in geological history. One of the professor's most important fossil discoveries was made in the Transantarctic Mountains, where, high up on glaciated peaks, she and her team found a sedimentary layer packed full of fragile leaves and twigs. Analysis showed that these fossils were the remains of stunted bushes of beech dating back to mere 3 to 5 million years old. Consequently, they were some of the last plants to have lived on Antarctica before the deep freeze set in. But other fossil discoveries from the continent reveal the incredible fact that truly subtropical forests existed on Antarctica during much earlier times, during the age of dinosaurs. According to Dr. Vanessa Bowman, who works with Francis at the University of Leeds, go back 100 million years ago, and Antarctica was covered in lush rainforests similar to those that exist in New Zealand today. We commonly find whole fossilized logs that must have come from really big trees. But the strangest and most inexplicable characteristic of these polar forests was their adaptation to the Antarctic light regime. Close to the pole, in winter, it is always night, while in the summer the sun shines even at midnight. Professor David Bierling of the University of Sheffield explained the problem that these Antarctic trees must have faced. During prolonged periods of warm winter darkness, trees consume their food store, and if this goes on for too long, they will eventually starve. To understand how these Antarctic trees survived against such seemingly insurmountable odds, Professor Bierling investigated the types of plants that once grew on Antarctica. What we did was grow seedlings of these trees in blacked-out greenhouses where we could simulate Antarctic light conditions. We also raised temperature and CO2 concentration to match ancient growing conditions. We found that trees made so much food during the summers that this eventually caused photosynthesis to slow down. As a result, they couldn't fully take advantage of the long, hot summers for photosynthesis. So, Professor Bierling's experiments demonstrated that trees were able to cope extremely well with the highly unusual environment. These hardy ancient trees were also able to withstand alternating months of pure sunlight and darkness, before eventually succumbing to history's greatest mass extinction. The discovery of fossil trees. In 2016, Eric Gulbranson, a paleoecologist from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and his team discovered the oldest polar forest on record from the southern polar region. Although the forest has not yet been precisely dated, Gulbranson believes it probably flourished about 280 million years ago before being swiftly buried in volcanic ash, which fortunately preserved it down to the cellular level. In Gulbranson's words, "They're actually some of the best preserved fossil plants in the world. The fungi in the wood itself were probably mineralized and turned into stone within a matter of weeks, in some cases probably while the tree was still alive. These things happen incredibly rapid. You could have witnessed it firsthand if you were there. Ancient fossil trees that date back 100 million years can also be found in a small part of Alexander Island on the west coast of the Antarctic Peninsula, with logs up to 23 feet high still standing upright. Incredibly, the roots of these coniferous trees are still attached to the carbonaceous soil deposits today. Scientists from Rice University in Houston, Texas, undertook research on fossilized from the Antarctic Peninsula, and were extremely surprised to discover that the region was covered in tundra up to 12 million years ago. The continent's gigantic ice sheets began forming about 38 million years ago, with the Antarctic Peninsula the last area to be covered in ice. There has always been controversy in the scientific community about how quickly this glaciation took place. Scientists have now determined the exact species of plant that existed on the Antarctic Peninsula 12 million years ago, and concluded from fossil record that there was a long, gradual process of glaciation over the peninsula. In 2018, more new forests were discovered by researchers from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee on the frozen slopes of the Transantarctic Mountains. Here they discovered gray rocks containing fossils from Antarctica's ancient forested past. The team discovered fossil fragments of 13 trees that are well over 260 million years old, showing that this forest flourished at the end of the Permian period, before the first dinosaurs walked the Earth. Then came the Permian extinction. Many geologists and paleoecologists believe that the Permian extinction occurred over the course of 15 million years during the latter part of the Permian period, 299 million years to 252 million years ago. What caused this great extinction of 90% of the world's species at the time is still shrouded in mystery, though we know it was triggered by a volcanic event. However, the team from the University of Wisconsin actually discovered 5 new fossil forests that would have lived into and beyond the Permian extinction interval. These forests may give us vital information about this mysterious extinction event, according to Eric Gilbronson. These new findings tell us how these organisms were reacting or responding to the climatic or environmental changes that were taking place during the extinction crisis. Having a fossilized record of the extinction interval is our only understanding of how life on the planet goes through such an event. A rainforest during the age of dinosaurs. In April 2020, it was revealed that scientists had discovered the remains of temperate rainforests which flourished in Antarctica around 90 million years ago. Fossil remnants of this forest were discovered on the ocean floor in the Amundsen Sea off the coast of West Antarctica. The significance of the find lies largely in its location, as 90 million years ago this West Antarctic forest would have been a mere 560 miles from the then South Pole. Ulrich Salzman, a professor of paleoecology and paleoclimatology at the Northumbria University in the UK, commented, "The numerous plant remains indicate that 93 to 83 million years ago, the coast of West Antarctica was swampy landscape in which temperate rainforests grew, similar to the forests that can still be found, say, on New Zealand's South Island. In order for such a landscape of dense vegetation to have existed in Antarctica, there would have had to have been little or no ice sheet present, and carbon dioxide levels would need to have been higher than previously thought. And this exactly is what scientists now believe was the case 90 million years ago on the continent. Antarctica continues to provide the scientific world with surprises, which must surely mean they have to constantly update many of their theories about its history and prehistory. Who knows what other revelations about this strange continent lie in wait?
Antarctica has long been a place of mystery and intrigue for those of us who are willing to look beyond the usual mundane actions of everyday lives. This gland of ice contains clues to the vast and ancient history of our planet, and many of these clues have yet to be discovered. We all have a somewhat basic understanding of the ice-covered landscape and the animals that survive in what is undoubtedly the coldest, driest and windiest continent on our planet. But this blanket of ice is one of the largest land masses on Earth, and with a whopping 5.5 million miles of dangerous and basically uninhabitable terrain, it undoubtedly has more secrets than we can imagine. Awaiting discoveries lurk beneath the ice sheets, and scientists are exploring and investigating new data that could support life we previously knew nothing about. Research has also come to light that indicates there are some parts of Antarctica which may have enough heat to allow a human to wear a t-shirt. According to the Anufena School of Environment and Society's highly acclaimed biogeographer, Dr. Ceridwen Fraser, whose research has helped develop our understanding of past climate change in Antarctica, there are such places like that in Antarctica. Antarctica's Ross Island hosts an active volcano called Mount Erebus, and Fraser states that over several years, the steam from this volcano has created a network of caves under the ice that can reach up to 25 degrees Celsius, perfectly comfortable for small wildlife to survive. Further analysis of the soil samples taken from these caves revealed DNA results, some of which were unexpected. While the majority of the samples were identified and corroborated with plants and animals that are already known to inhabit other areas of Antarctica, the rest of the samples were unidentifiable. This discovery would suggest there are new species of animal life and plant life living beneath the ice that are previously unknown. Previous research has shown evidence of fungi and bacteria in the caves that may suggest there are more to be discovered. This underground network of caves beneath the ice are not very easy to access, so exploration is quite a daunting task, and it's yet to be uncovered exactly how many of these cave systems are under the ice. The mysteries of our planet's history and its creation have always fascinated us, and we're forever attempting to update our knowledge of the world around us. A team of researchers recently endeavored a 3-day explorative drilling operation down through thousands of feet of ice into what is called Antarctica's Lost Lake. While we may envisage this continent as a single massive sheet of ice, there are actually hidden treasures in the form of natural lakes under this surface. This particular one is called Lake Mercer. They're called lost lakes because up until now they were completely inaccessible. But the team of researchers that accessed Lake Mercer drilled a hole over 1 kilometer deep through the ice sheet until they reached this body of water. While the drill hole is only a couple of feet wide, this was enough to create an avenue to the body of water beneath, which will allow the scientists to get samples for analysis and possibly new and exciting data. So why are our scientists so intrigued with the lost lakes of Antarctica? We tend to forget that Antarctica was once a lush, tropical paradise with a range of flora and fauna that is evident in fossils found under the ice. According to scientists who've discovered fossilized plants containing charcoal, which date back as far as the dinosaurs, during the third and final period of the Mesozoic era, the Cretaceous period, there was an era where wildfires were rampant. The Cretaceous high fire period was a global event that reached almost all continental masses during that period in Earth's history. And what the scientists discovered was that these fires managed to make their way as far as Antarctica. While rolling green hills and lush vegetation were once there, there's now nothing but ice. But this doesn't mean that it was a less hostile environment than it is now. Erratic and destructive volcanic activity would have erupted, creating havoc and starting wildfires that would have torn through the continent. Scientists delve into the unknown by accessing this lost lake in a bid to gather whatever information they can. The more data that is harvested, the more it will add to whatever is already known of the geologic activity that transpires in and around Antarctica. It will also help researchers to gain more knowledge of the scientific hydrology of the subglacial lakes. Hydrology is an extremely important science, as it is the study of the movement, distribution and management of water on Earth and on other planets, including the water cycle, water resources and environmental watershed sustainability. Although Lake Mercer and other lost lakes are not visible on the surface, it doesn't mean that they don't sustain life. Scientists are devoted to the task of understanding more about how these hidden bodies of water move and circulate underneath these massive sheets of compacted ice. how these waters expedite the flow of carbon and other organic materials that are necessary for the biological processes that occur in these freezing conditions is something they will explore in depth. The fact that these hidden lakes have been so inaccessible up to now means that they have never been explored before. The possibilities of discovering new species of animal or plant life or microorganisms with the analysis of any samples gathered is endless. In 2013, researchers drilled through 800 meters of ice to reach Lake Whillans successfully. They drilled 4 kilometers down and reached the first level of Lake Vostok before conceding defeat. Another fruitless attempt was made as they tried to access Lake Ellsworth when the boreholes were unable to permeate the dense sheet of ice. On appearance, the Antarctic is a desolate and inhospitable landscape, but this barren land is host to hundreds of these large unexplored bodies of water, silently circulating underneath the dense ice sheet of this hostile landscape. The importance of this research cannot be emphasized enough. The significance of Antarctica in relation to the regulation of our global climate should not be miscalculated. What is happening to our ecosystem as a consequence of warming temperatures and rising sea levels can possibly be mitigated with further exploration and a deeper understanding of the complexities of this mainly uninhabitable land. For numerous decades, radar instruments have scanned across miles and miles of the continent of Antarctica in search of data. Microwave pulses are bounced off the surface to peer through the ice in the hope of tracing the underlying layout and topography. An incredible discovery was made by combining data gathered by aircraft satellites with ice-penetrating radar technology towed by snowmobiles. Researchers discovered a huge gorge that was originally an ancient mountain range that is deeper than the Grand Canyon. Now stratified with layers of 1,000-year-old glaciers, the colossal valley reaches 1.9 miles deep by 200 miles long and is more than 15.5 miles wide. To put this into context, the Grand Canyon is only about a mile deep. Dr. Neil Ross, who is a geology professor at Newcastle University, sees this find as incredibly fortuitous. The team of researchers and scientists spent 3 years mapping out the subglacial mountain range before the discovery, but never expected to find this valley. He explained that although they had been able to gather data from either end of this vast hidden canyon, they had no clue as to what lay between the 2 points. Satellite data was used to fill in the missing information, and although the valley is covered by miles and miles of ice, it's so big it can be seen from space. After analyzing all the data, it appears this valley was formed millions of years ago by a small ice field, like those of the Antarctic Peninsula. Some years later, a large hole was also found beneath the ice during the study of the natural and artificial areas of the ice-laden landscape. This hole was not as deep, but still measured 0.6 miles, and is also impressively longer than the Grand Canyon, which makes it an incredibly significant discovery. There is so much on this beautiful planet that we call home that we have yet to discover and explore. Antarctica, as one of the largest landmasses by far, has so many mysteries that are constantly being revealed. Scientists have begun constructing a sort of time capsule, a black box if you will. This is being made durable enough to outlive humanity on this planet. It will contain information on our histories and evidence of our existence, if or after the human race becomes extinct. This black box will be our legacy and allow us to detail humanity's accomplishments, as well as afford a narrative to future civilizations as to what took place in the human race's cycle on this planet. The Project Earth's black box is to be completed by early 2022 and will record every step humanity takes towards our own possible destruction. It will be constructed from an immense monolith of 3-inch thick steel and placed in a remote location in Tasmania. The black box will use a system of internet-connected storage devices powered by solar power on the roof in case the power grid fails. It will be similar to the black boxes used to identify the cause of airplane crashes. As we ponder on the mysteries of the icy continent of Antarctica, It is chilling to know that in its history there were fires spreading across this once green and lush landscape. The Maori, who are the indigenous people of New Zealand, travelled to Antarctica 1,000 years before any Europeans. This civilization arrived in New Zealand from East Polynesia in the 14th century in canoes. They had lived in secluded, separate existence in Polynesia in total isolation and developed their own diverse culture, unlike that of other Eastern Polynesian tribes. Whilst their language, mythology and techniques are all noted and recorded in cultural history, what has been overlooked is their journey to Antarctica. Relatively new research suggests that this adept culture may have reached the icy continent as early as the 7th century. This would have been long before the first European missions ventured out towards Antarctica. A new study, which was published in the Journal of the Royal Society of New Zealand, has taken a more panoramic view of history and offers a different perspective. The evidence that was previously neglected has now been taken into consideration, and it has connected some of the gaps that were missing. New sources have been examined, including Maori legends told down through the generations and documented events on carvings and weavings. Conservation biologist Priscilla Wahe, who is lead documenter of the study of the New Zealand Government Research Institute, Manaki Wanua, has said that by piecing all the clues together, the picture clearly shows the connection to Antarctica. These links have always been there since the earliest forms of migration and travel were recorded. Numerous Maori legends and stories relate to the early adventures and exploration of the Antarctic, and some of the Maori tribal groups, which include the Ingata Rurara and Te Atiawa, share the voyage of an explorer called Hui Te Ingoria. In the legend, this explorer sailed his vessel to Antarctica, where he found a misty and dark place that never saw the sun. The narrative also describes the Arctic landscape, icebergs, and marine animals. Until this study came to light, our comprehension and understanding of the Antarctic and any exploratory adventures to it were based on the missions and accomplishments of European explorers. Many historical articles even cite that the first vessel to spot the continent was a Russian voyager in January of 1820, although we now know that there were such early depictions gathered by the Maori. Wahe, in an interview, told the New Zealand Herald that some of the Maori people have been critiquing this date for years, knowing they were privy to prior records of exploration of the Antarctic. Researchers are now looking for the history books to be amended, considering the information that is available now. If viewers will pardon the pun, this information is probably only the tip of the iceberg. What other secrets of the past are hidden underneath this inhospitable continent of ice? With the constant progression in machinery and the major advancements in technology, who knows what we will learn from our planet's history that has been frozen in time.